You're listening to Rock Solid People, a podcast by Max King.
The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
And so welcome to Rock Solid People, a podcast where I speak to amazing and interesting individuals in the disability space. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Jodi Rogers. Jodi, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, how are you going?
Good, thank you. Now, Jodi Rogers established Birds and Bees after 25 years of working within education, disability and sexuality fields. Jodi is a qualified sexologist, counsellor and special education teacher and has worked in Australia and overseas across the lifespan within early intervention schools, adult and community settings in both the disability and sexual health fields. Unique combination and experience, Jodi has developed counselling and training programs that make learning about the complex area of sexuality both comfortable and relevant. And I'm really excited to have you here today to talk to us about your experience, your journey, and your history, and also just, I guess, shining a light on what is sometimes an awkward, but it shouldn't be, awkward phase of everybody's lives. I've got a teenage son. I've got a teenage son. He's 17 years old. He's probably going to be holding his head in shame if he knows on my podcast. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have with him. And yeah, so welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Birds and Bees, your counselling, education and consulting services. Tell us a little bit about it and how you got into this.
Well, I've got sort of 4 different postgraduate qualifications.
Right.
So Originally I was working within the disability space, but as I have worked in disability services and specialise really in working with people with cognitive disability and autism. But because I'd started in education, and I'm old, so when I started in education, it was sort of the 80s, one of the things that became really pronounced to me was that, one, at that point, there was really a lot of lacking in really high-quality sexuality education for young people, particularly as they were hitting their adolescence. And then what I realised as I sort of progressed through my career was that once somebody transitioned from school into adult services, we spent a lot of time talking about independent skills, employment skills, where people are going to live. But we seemed to drop the ball where it came to relationship skills. We talk about community access and developing friendships and things like that. But, as adults, majority of the population would say that it's research, part of our sense of well-being and our mental health is really based around our relationships, which includes intimate, romantic relationships. And I just found that was sort of lacking. So I ended up doing, one of my degrees of the 4 was a master's in sexual health. And I basically did that to put my money where my mouth was, and then specialised in that degree, specialised in working with people with cognitive disability or neurological disability or diversity. And then when that kind of shift happened between NDIS, I was sort of like you, Max, I was working in a managerial role and I really had to think about who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be. And I just thought, I might just throw my hat in the ring and just see if I set up a private practice that was consistently based on providing sex therapy and sexology and counselling for people with intellectual disability. Would this work? I gave myself 6 months.
Yep.
That was 6 years ago, and nearly 7. So, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow, fantastic! Yeah. And I'm assuming that when you got into this, and as it says in your bio, you've got 25 years of working in the space. Was there have you found a change in people's attitudes, not just to the overall conversation? Was it something that was less inclined? People were less inclined previously to have conversations around people with cognitive disabilities and their requirements, or their general just basic human needs for relationships.
You can imagine within that time period, at one point, people. Well, there's still a part of the community that would not even think about this, or would think about this, that people that was aligned that people with a disability really were asexual, didn't even desire. It was either one thing or another. Either people with a disability were, and I'm really talking about cognitive disability, or some people thought physical disability too, were either completely asexual would not desire any type of sexual relationship at all, or on the other hand, were completely oversexed. So there was these kind of two ideas about how this worked. And I think that's so interesting because it's like we label somebody, but then when we label them, we also label them for the whole of their life.
Yeah.
And, sexuality spans across a lifetime. So, and just because you've got a disability does not mean you're not a sexual being in any shape or form. And, sexuality is not just about the act of sex. Sexuality is also about our gender, our body image, our sensuality, which is really an important component for many autistic people. It's huge. It's a huge area. And so in my practice now, in counselling practice, I cover all of those areas as well. But a lot of my time is about really providing good psychosexual counselling education to help people make informed decisions.
Yeah. Wow, amazing. And so then you were obviously the resident expert on love on the spectrum. How did love on the spectrum come across you? Was it a marriage made in heaven?
Well, no. One, I refuse to let them call me an expert because I think anyone who says they're a relationship expert has definitely got something going on. As we know, relationships are really complex and you can't be an expert in relationships. We're all fumbling our way through most of the time.
Aren't we just?
But no, it was one of those things of it was somebody who knew somebody. I was actually presenting at a sexologist conference in Sydney and was presenting at a sexologist conference to sort of support sex therapists about how we change our counselling practice when we are providing counselling for an autistic person. And Northern Pictures, who are the production company, had heard of me. They basically wanted me to help them find more autistic people. So here's this woman that works within this space of relationships and sexuality for autistic people. So I had popped in there just because I was in Sydney to pick up some flyers to help them find some more autistic people. But when they met me, I don't know what happened actually, Max. I think I was as relaxed as I am with you at the moment. And I just think they thought, oh, hang on a minute. This might be something good. Also, what I think they were realising is as they were doing the filming, because the filming's, it's called a doco-series, which means they just put the camera on and they don't turn it off. And then they edit it down to what they need. But I think what they were finding too is that some of the people who were on that first season just needed some help. They needed more, they needed some encouragement and they needed some help about, some of them it was their very, very first date ever. And they were being filmed going on their first date ever in their lives on television. And that puts you in a really vulnerable position.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, really, it was more of a case of somebody knew somebody knew somebody.
And I would imagine exactly as you said there, the people on their first date, or even if you're not, I mean, even if you filmed me on a date with my wife, if you put a camera in my face, I think it would be very confronting.
Yeah.
And if it's your first date and all of a sudden... Yeah. And, that's, hats off to them for all taking part in this.
It's for me, even originally I went, there is no way I am doing this because it's a very vulnerable position to put yourself, even just imagine, don't even think about a date with somebody. Think about somebody coming in with a camera and filming you at work for 4 hours straight. I'm talking about if you need to go to the toilet, you have to say, oh, hi, can I go? It is a very vulnerable position to put yourself in. And for me, there was two things. One, I'd never been on television. I didn't really know how it worked. But two, I have really, really high standards of my work and I have very high standards in upholding somebody's confidentiality. And part of being a counsellor is developing deep rapport and a genuine relationship with somebody. And to do that on telly, very complex and difficult.
Sure. And whilst you were there as, so I won't use the word experts.
Specialist, I like to say.
Specialist, thank you. Whilst you were there as a specialist and obviously there to assist in your professional role, what has this being on the show taught you? What's the lessons that you've taken away from it?
Do you know what? Some of the things that I learnt from it, well, one, I learned a lot about just television itself because I had no idea how that worked and how you can be filmed for, 4 hours and cut down to 4 minutes. You have to really trust the production team. So, just learning about that side. But more than anything else, what I learned was when we work within the disability field, you know how you think everybody knows what you know? Yep. So I constantly think that everybody knows what I know, but I've had, nearly 30 years working within the disability field and particularly with autistic people. So I think everybody knows autism. I think everybody understands this. So what I found really incredible was the amount of people from just the general population that don't spend their day-to-day hanging out with people with disability, just how many people they learnt so much from it.
Yeah.
Really learnt from it. And also that thing of just I can walk down the street at home and somebody say, oh, how's, Michael, or how's Kelvin, or whatever. It's like people created a relationship with these people on the telly and had a vested interest in their lives. But I think that was the number one thing. What I realised is that we still have a long way to go in educating the general community just about, so what? People have a disability. It's just any kind of difference that we have in life, but there's still a lot of them and us that is seen by the general population. And what I learned a lot from the show was just breaking down. We continually have to break down those barriers. And even though that's been something I've known for 30 years, it continues to be something that every single person within the disability sector has to uphold as being really important, that we need to continually be educating the general community.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think the show has gone a long way to that. I mean, it's one of the things that has. I mean, it's definitely broken ground as far as I'm concerned. And has it been taken up? It's an Australian-based production.
Yeah. So originally, and that's probably why I said yes to it to start with, Max, because it was on the ABC, and I thought I was going to be on one episode with Michael, which is the first episode of the first season. So I went, oh yeah, I'll do it once. And then, then I had to go do a few more times with them in that first season. And then it got so well known in Australia on an ABC television, word of mouth in Australia got out, and it became so popular in Australia that then Netflix saw it. And so the first season went global on Netflix in 2020, I think. The second season came out in the ABC this year. It's already globally. It's in 208 countries. It's in 7 different languages, and it comes out on Netflix Australia in December because, the ABC had it. So, my original idea is I thought I'd be on 3 minutes of television on the ABC. Oh. And now it's, 2 seasons are international.
And so, I mean, I guess the upshot of that is, and what generally happens is that local production crews start finding their own version of Love on the Spectrum in their own countries, in their own languages, with their own nuances of dating, et cetera, et cetera. So the positive and spin-out effects of this will be enormous. Will be huge.
Yeah, it'll be huge.
That is quite a touching point. I love the fact that whilst your private practice has undoubtedly helped hundreds of people, no doubt about it, but the consequence of what you've now done on Love on the Spectrum is enormous. In the millions.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing, that when I was thinking about whether I'd do it or not do it, I think when you've got the level of experience that I have and the level of both theoretical and practical, because, I started my career as a support worker when I was 19. And so this has been my whole life. And so to have that combination of a lot of theoretical understanding and the qualifications, but more than anything else, it's 25, nearly 30 years of hanging out with people with a disability every day. Yeah. And for me, that's probably where I ended up saying, okay, yes, I'm going to say yes to this, because it's much more about the greater good. It was much more to say, well, how many people is this going to help? And it wasn't really people, it wasn't autistic people. Autistic people don't need help in understanding autism.
It's helping everybody.
Else.
It's helping everybody. It's helping communities understand individuals that might have, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, but might just be, different, and that's the most amazing thing. And I think, I don't know how you can extrapolate it, because if you say it's going to so many countries and being seen by so many people, the positive and consequences of what you've done and what the show's achieved is unbelievable. And look, we've heard you say that you love working with autistic people. Yeah. Why is that something that resonates with you so strongly?
Oh, well, I just like people. I love people. I absolutely love people.
You seem like a very friendly person.
But for me, I think that the thing about, I can see 7 to 8 clients a day, and, I've hung out with autistic people for a long time, but I learn something new and different. Every single autistic person that I hang out with teaches me a new way of perceiving the world, a new way of interacting with the world, a new way of communicating, a new way. So I'm constantly learning, or every day I'm constantly learning from autistic people. And it's so much, I'm challenged all the time. I'm constantly challenged because if you think about the fact that I have to, and we're only really, the autism, it hasn't been a stagnant sort of diagnosis. In my lifetime, I've seen it change 4 times, and we're continuing to learn about human neurology. So on one hand, I've got to keep up to date with the changing understanding of human neurology and people who are diverse in the neurology. But on the other hand, I'm a sexologist, so I also have to keep up with where the world is shifting and changing in terms of our understanding of sexuality and gender sexual orientation. So I every single day of my life, I am learning about 2 things I love: people, I shouldn't say, and sex, but that's sexuality.
People and sexuality, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very strong point. And actually, that was obviously, you have chosen that. You put your money where your mouth is. One of your PhDs, as you mentioned, or degrees was in sexual health.
Yeah.
That's a choice to go down that pathway. Do you feel it was a calling? Do you think that it was something that was that was?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a calling in terms of that, as I was saying to you, I think one of the most important things and one of the most beautiful things in life is a relationship where we can be very vulnerable and intimate with another person. So I've always believed that. But the other thing for me is that throughout my career, I have really I've really believed in upholding the rights of people with a disability. I think if you're a person who is able-bodied or neurotypical, then our job is to stand up for the rights of people with a disability. And in Australia, we ratified the Convention of Rights of People with Disability, and part of that is upholding the basic human right to comprehensive sexuality education, for people to be able to express themselves sexually how they want to, for people to make informed choices about relationships and their fertility and, who they marry, when they marry, all of this, if they want to marry or not, all of that is a basic human right. And those basic human rights need to be extended for people with a disability. And if they're not, then we're letting down the community that we say that we're supporting. So, you can pick a massive range of things within our field of where you want to support people that are not getting equality and equity. And for me, that's on a daily basis. We need to be continually saying this is about inclusiveness and accessibility. And for me, accessibility is also about really good sexuality education, which limits people's vulnerability, Max. So it's about kind of, supporting people not to be left vulnerable to abuse and neglect. It's also not leaving them vulnerable to having offending behaviour. But it's more central to that. I don't want to talk about the risk averse. This is the pleasure of life. This is pleasure and this is the joy of life. These relationships bring all of us joy. And so, I'm determined to uphold those rights and determined to make sure that every single person that I hang out with has access to really good counselling and education in that area. Right, so you get me on my high horse about it. So when I start,
I love the passion. I love the passion behind it, because one of the things that I am very passionate about as well is sort of financial independence, financial literacy. We talk about giving someone the ability to go to the shops on their own with debit card and purchase goods as you and I would do and take for granted, perhaps. And that's for me. And I think that the extension is exactly that. We're talking about sort of some of the great pleasures in life, which is relationships and intimacy and as you say, understanding the nuances of that and acceptable and unacceptable, and just being able to navigate that, which is a very tricky thing for us all to do. I really and for me, I love the passion behind standing up for individuals' rights, basic human rights, as you mentioned, and to do so, on a daily basis as well. I think is important. And so I don't mind getting you on your high horse at all. I love the passion.
That's good. I can easily be put on it.
Well, I was about to say, you're a household name now. Has this changed you once you're now a famous TV star?
Oh God, I wouldn't say famous at all. Maybe famous in our community, because people probably hook into it. But no, strangely, I still get recognised. Yeah, I'll get recognised in the street. I'm just living my day-to-day life, so it doesn't change much for me. But what it has done is it's given me great access to do things like this, you know, chat with you and chat with the broader community and work internationally and working really interestingly in two sides, because what I've also found is that not only is it working within the disability community where people want to talk more about sexuality, and I've sort of found that space has opened up, but it's also what I've found is it's opened up other areas. So I've been talking to, just the other night I did a keynote for an organisation in the UK that are relationship therapists. And so the relationship therapists had me talking about autism. So, you know, that they're not, so it's actually holding up the two areas, supporting people that are working with the general population to be more inclusive of people who communicate differently and learn differently. It's supporting them, but it's also then working within the disability field to sort of talk much more openly about somebody's sexuality rights and their rights for relationships and adult relationships, because we don't talk about this a lot as services. You know, how do we support something simple? How do we support two people who may be in different accommodation services who actually want to have a relationship together? You know, how do we support that to happen so that we're not impinging on their right to have choice in that relationship? These are big discussions. So yeah, much more. You know, I don't wake up every morning and say, "Oh, geez, I'm on global Netflix. How exciting!" You know, I definitely don't do that.
You don't get priority service in the local Mullum cafes, do you?
No,
Come to the front of the queue.
No, they're more pushed to the back when they say
pushed to the back. No, one other question I've got for you. Obviously, you are the consultant and counsellor that has that capacity to do 6 or 8 people a day, as you've mentioned. Is there a process whereby the methodologies and the learnings that you have are being put down on paper to facilitate other people learning what you know? Is there a standard that you're creating, have signed up for? Is there something? And the reason I ask is one of our goals at Auscare Support is to create various different hubs around the country that support individuals to access therapies, but not in a therapeutic environment. So it's sort of much more of a social environment, and it's on that cohort of young adults. And I'd be keen to know, you know, how do we distill some of that, Jodi, birds and bees? How do we distill some of that and I'm going to say spread the love, but that's probably not the right phrase. Now, how do we share the information and knowledge that you've got with to make it so that we can have more people learning about it?
Yeah. You're singing the tune of lots of people at the moment, Max, saying, "Jodi, why don't you create this? Well, Jodi, why don't you do?" You know, it's time. And so at the moment, I do offer for services and organisations. You know, I offer training, particularly for frontline support workers, where you're talking about people just sort of talking about the attitudes and values and what the organisational policy is based around that sort of stuff. So I offer that. Well, I've been offering in Australia, but internationally, but I've just been recently asked if I will put this into some kind of training package so that it could be, you know, Max, the problem with me is, and you'd understand it, the problem isn't, look at me. No, let me tell you about my problems. My problem is that because I work so individualistically, that I change and modify everything I do with every single person I work with.
Yeah, it's hard.
But there is a base sort of framework that we need to work through and have an understanding of. And the hope is that I can create time to be able to do that so that then any organisation can actually have access to that. But I'm also very, very conscious that we're all time poor, and I'm very conscious that the people that need to do it as support workers, mainly frontline support workers. So it's just kind of finding the balance. It's once again all the theory that's in my head, but also having deep understanding of how organisations work and day-to-day practicalities of professional development for people. So at this present moment, I do a lot of training for services and organisations, but the hope is to create this into something that's way more accessible than that in the future.
Great. Well, I know that we are launching some peer supports workers, and we're doing that in not currently up in Ballina, but down in Nowra. I know that we would be very, very keen to have our support workers go through a training course with you so that they're aware of it. And I know that if there is the opportunity to sign up for that, we'd love to. I can tell you from my perspective, I think what you're doing is really empowering and really fantastic. I love, as you say, just the acknowledgement that it's such an important part of everybody's life. Who you are.
It's that thing, Max, that a lot of us don't even talk about sexuality as a general community. So if I said just to even anyone, do you know what childhood sexual development is, and what is typical development with our sexuality? A lot of people don't talk about it, and a lot of people find this area very complex and very difficult. Sometimes people find it really difficult even to talk to their partner about these intimate things. So yeah, it's an area that I think that as a community we really need to be much more open about talking about. And my particular area is just supporting people that have kind of a less access to this information. Or if they're accessing it on the internet. We all know what that kind of education can provide. I agree with you. It's lifelong. Our sexuality is from the moment we're born to the moment that we die, and encompasses so much about who we are and how we present ourselves to the world. And so for me, it's fundamental.
Absolutely fundamental. Look, I'm going to wrap it up there. I really want to thank you very much for your time. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you probably got clients waiting for you. As I say, I'm excited as an organisation for us to work with you in the future. I'm pleased that Jo has put me on to you. I know that I would like anyone that works with us to be aware of some of the work that you do to train the trainer or train the support worker. I can tell you that we'll be signing up for that. Thank you very much, Jodi Rodgers, Birds and Bees, and Love on the Spectrum. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Max.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to Rock Solid People. For more interviews, stay tuned.